All right, third and last video for rational functions, how to find the intercepts. All right, and for the most part, this is not going to be news to you because we already know how to find intercepts of functions. All right, so let's just remember that when we are going to find X intercepts, we let Y equal to 0 and solve. And for Y-intercepts, we let X equal to 0. All right, so finding Y-intercepts is always going to be a little bit easier because we're going to let X equal to 0. That's essentially just plugging in and figuring out a Y coordinate. Okay, so we're going to let X be 0. We're essentially finding F of 0. This is just going to be a plug and chug. All right, so I plugged in 0 for X. That leaves me with -3 on top and a +9 on bottom. And if I reduce that, those are both divisible by 3. I get -1/3. All right, so that's my Y-intercept. Just have to plug in X equals 0. All right, and then I will find the X intercept. And this is going to be a little bit more work. Okay, so for my X intercept, we set Y equal to 0. Okay, so f of X is another name for Y, so I'm going to set the whole function equal to 0. Right, and to solve this equation, let's see, I need to get rid of that fraction. So I'm going to multiply both sides by that denominator. I'm going to multiply, this is kind of our trick we learned for solving equations that we could multiply through by the common denominator to simplify the equation. So I'm going to multiply both sides by x squared plus 9, because that'll get rid of the fraction problem that I have. And on the right, I've got that set of parentheses, x squared plus 9 times 0, that's just going to be 0. All right, that's much easier to solve. I'm going to add 3 to both sides. So I get 5x equals 3. And divide both sides by 5. And I get 3/5. All right, so my x-intercept is going to be 3/5, 0. All right, so we're going to do another one, but before I do that, I want to point out what happened up here at the top when I set the whole fraction equal to 0, and then I multiplied both sides by the denominator. Notice that the x squared plus 9 just kind of disappeared. It really didn't play a role at all in my calculations because I just multiplied both sides by the denominator. And that's actually going to turn out to be the case every time with a rational function. All right, so this is going to give us a shortcut for x-intercepts of rational functions. We're just going to set the top equal to 0, like we ended up with here. The denominator kind of got multiplied on both sides. We're just going to set top equal to 0. Okay, so we'll kind of remember that as a shortcut because that's much easier than setting the whole thing equal to 0. All right, so let's take that with us as we go to the next slide, plugging in 0 for y-intercept and our shortcut for setting the top equal to 0. All right, so again, easier to find, easier to find y-intercepts first. So for y-intercept, we'll do that. Just find f of 0, and everything turns to 0, except for the constants. So up top, I got a bunch of 0, minus 10. On the bottom, -1. And I get a y-intercept of 10. All right, so my x-intercepts, Okay, I can just set y equal to 0, but I'm going to remember that we just figured out that we have a shortcut to set the top equal to 0. All right, so I'm going to take the top of my function, x squared minus 3x minus 10, set it equal to 0. And that's a quadratic equation, so I can either factor that or I can use the quadratic formula. Either one would be fine here. Let's see, this factors. Let me get 5 and 2. There we go. And then set both factors equal to 0. Okay, and add 5 to both sides. Subtract 2 from both sides. Or you can just use that trick where you change the numbers. And I get 2 x-intercepts here. So my x-intercepts are 5, 0 and negative 2, 0. And that'll be where this function crosses the x-axis. Okay. All right, so not too bad. Let's do one more. F of x equals 1 over x minus 3 squared. All right, so again, y-intercept. We're just going to find f of 0. And I get 1 over negative 3 squared, which is going to be a positive 9. And then for my x-intercept, because I see it's a rational function and I know I've got a shortcut, to set my top equal to 0. All right, well, the numerator of this function is just 1. Oh, so that doesn't look like it makes sense, right? 1 equal to 0. That is an equation that doesn't make any sense. That has no solution. Okay, so what that means is that this function has no x-intercept. All right, and that's okay. It just doesn't have an x-intercept, but it does have a y-intercept. Okay, and again, we can always go and graph these on Desmos to make sure that they make sense. Okay. All right, so now that we know how to find vertical asymptotes, horizontal asymptotes, y-intercepts, x-intercepts, when we meet on Zoom for class, we're going to try to actually graph some of these rational functions by hand. And I will see you then.